The red stain on the sterile white paper was the only thing with any color. It was the end of a story, a tiny, brutal period at the end of a sentence I hadn't even finished writing. I'm Virginia Steele. I'm 32 years old, and up until about 3 hours ago, I was pregnant. Now I was just a woman sitting on a closed toilet lid in a hospital bathroom, staring at the evidence of my failure. Through the heavy door, I could hear my husband's voice, low and placating. I know, Mom. I know. It's just a lot right now. A pause. No, she's fine. The doctor said she's physically fine. Physically fine. The words echoed in the tiled room. I felt like I'd been hollowed out with a spoon, but sure, I was physically fine. Zane, my husband of 5 years, is 35. He's a man who believes any problem can be solved by ignoring it long enough for it to go away. His mother, Fiona, believes any problem can be solved by her. I could practically hear her through the door, her voice a thin wire of concern wrapped around a core of steel control. Of course I'll call you when we're home, Zane murmured. Okay, love you too. The door creaked open. He stood there, his handsome face pinched with a discomfort that looked more like annoyance than grief. Ready to go? The car ride back to our apartment was silent. I watched the city lights blur past the window, each one a pinprick in the suffocating darkness. Zane kept his hands glued to the steering wheel at 10 and 2, his eyes fixed on the road. He didn't reach for my hand. He didn't say he was sorry. He didn't say anything at all. The silence was louder than a scream. Back home, the air was thick with the ghost of our expectations. The half-painted nursery, the little box of gender-neutral onesies I'd bought last week. I dropped my keys on the entryway table and walked into the living room, sinking onto the sofa. I wanted to sleep for 100 years. Zane didn't sit down. He stood in the middle of the room, running a hand through his hair. So, my mom and I were talking. Of course you were. About what? I asked, my voice flat. I need some space, Ginny, to process this. He wouldn't look at me. His eyes were focused on a spot on the wall just over my head. It's been a lot of pressure. The baby, the promotion I'm up for. I'm just overwhelmed. I stared at him, a cold dread creeping up my spine, colder than the grief. You need space? I'm the one who I couldn't say the word. I'm the one this happened to. It happened to us, he corrected, his voice taking on a defensive edge, and I'm not dealing with it well. I need to decompress, or I'm going to be useless to you. It was a classic Zane argument, twisting his selfishness into a noble act of self-care done for my benefit. So, he continued, finally meeting my gaze, Mom, she went ahead and booked me a flight to Aruba, just for a week, to clear my head. The room tilted. Aruba. Sunshine and sand and cocktails while the remnants of our baby were being treated as medical waste. The cruelty of it was breathtaking. She what? It's for the best, he insisted. I'll come back refreshed. We can start trying again when the time is right. He was already talking about replacing it, like a broken appliance. I felt nothing. The grief, the anger, it all receded, leaving behind a strange, icy calm. I watched him walk into our bedroom and pull a suitcase from the top of the closet. It was a new one, a sleek, hard-shell carry-on I'd never seen before. As he packed, my eyes drifted over his things. The new watch on his wrist, the designer shirts he was folding with such care. Small things I'd noticed over the past few weeks but had dismissed. A little voice in my head, the one I'd been ignoring, whispered that something was wrong. It wasn't just about the miscarriage. It had been wrong for a while. I'd seen a few odd alerts from our joint savings account lately, notifications for transfers I didn't recognize. I'd meant to ask him about them, but then the spotting started and the world had narrowed to a single, terrifying focus, He zipped the suitcase and rolled it toward the door. He leaned down and kissed my forehead. His lips were cool. "I'll call you when I land," he said. "Try not to do anything dramatic while I'm gone, okay? Just rest." He closed the front door behind him with a soft click. Dramatic. The word hung in the air. I sat there for a long time, listening to the hum of the refrigerator. Then I stood up, walked over to the coffee table, and picked up my laptop. I opened it, the screen casting a pale blue light on my face. My fingers, steady and sure, typed in the web address for our bank. The login screen blinked at me, a patient, pulsing cursor. I typed in the username and password we'd shared for 5 years. Zane and Ginny forever. The irony was so thick I could have choked on it. The checking account looked normal. His last paycheck, our mortgage payment, the usual stream of grocery bills and Amazon orders. It was the joint savings account that made my breath catch. The balance was less than half of what it should have been. My hands didn't shake. I clicked on the transaction history, my movements precise, methodical. It wasn't one big withdrawal. It was a death by 1,000 cuts. It started 2 months ago, a transfer of $2,500. A week later, another for $3,000. Then $4,000. The amounts grew bolder as the weeks went on, little electronic bites taken out of our future, our baby's future. Each transaction had the same destination, a savings account at a different bank under a name I didn't recognize. The total was $32,000. The grief from the hospital was a thick, suffocating fog. This was different. This was a shard of glass in my gut, sharp and clean and horribly clarifying. He hadn't just been dismissive. He had been planning. While I was picking out paint colors for the nursery, he was siphoning away our money. The new watch, the expensive suitcase, it all clicked into place. He wasn't just taking a trip to clear his head. He was starting a new life. My training as a legal clerk kicked in, a switch flipping in my brain. The emotional grieving wife was shoved into a back room, and the calm, detail-oriented professional took over. I took screenshots of every single transfer, saved them to a thumb drive, and then emailed them to a new, secure email address I created on the spot. Documentation first, always. Next, I found the number for our bank's 24-hour fraud department. When a woman with a tired voice answered, I kept my own voice even and low. "My name is Virginia Steele," I said. "I need to report suspicious activity on my joint savings account and place an immediate freeze on all funds." "Can you describe the activity, ma'am?" "A series of unauthorized transfers made over the past 8 weeks. I believe my husband has been moving funds without my consent to an external account I have no access to." There was a pause, the sound of typing. "I see the transfers you're referring to, Mrs. Steele. I can place a temporary freeze, but to make it permanent or to investigate further, both account holders—" "He is on a flight to Aruba and will be unreachable." I cut her off, my voice like ice. "He left less than an hour ago. I am concerned he plans to drain the remaining funds. I need you to lock it down. Now." My tone must have worked. There was more typing, a few clicks. "Okay, the account is frozen. Nothing can go in or out without both of you being present at a branch with 2 forms of ID. Thank you." I hung up. Step 2 was complete. Step 3 was protecting myself. I used my phone to open a new checking account at a completely different bank. I filled out the online forms, then logged into my work's payroll portal and redirected my direct deposit. It wouldn't hit for another week, but the change was made. He was cut off. The last step was the most important. I scrolled through my contacts until I found a name I hadn't thought of in years. Enzo Whitney. We'd been in a pre-law society together in college. He was a few years older, ambitious to the point of being terrifying, and wickedly smart. I remembered him eviscerating an opponent in a mock trial competition with a quiet surgical precision that had left the room breathless. He was an aggressive divorce attorney now, according to his LinkedIn profile. Exactly what I needed. It was almost midnight, but I sent him a text. Enzo, it's Virginia Steele from college. I have an urgent and confidential matter. Can you talk? My phone buzzed less than a minute later. Call me. I dialed. He picked up on the first ring. Virginia, it's been a while. What's urgent? No pleasantries. I appreciated that. I laid it out for him in the same flat, factual tone I'd used with the bank. The miscarriage, the trip to Aruba, the $32,000. I told him everything, leaving out the emotion, presenting it like a case brief. He was silent for a long moment when I finished. I could hear the faint sound of a siren in the background on his end. He left you less than 24 hours after a miscarriage to go on a vacation his mother paid for after secretly transferring over 30 grand out of your joint savings. He finally asked, his voice a low growl. Okay. First, I'm sorry for your loss. That's horrific. Second, I'm taking your case. A wave of relief so powerful it almost buckled my knees washed over me. What's the first move? We file tomorrow morning. We'll petition for an emergency order to freeze everything, all assets, joint and individual. We'll claim financial abuse and abandonment. We'll bury him in discovery requests. We'll make it so he can't buy a bottle of water without a judge's approval. He paused. This is going to be ugly, Virginia. Are you ready to burn it all down? I looked around the apartment we had built together, at the ghost of a nursery down the hall, at the empty space where his suitcase had been. The grief was still there, a cold, heavy stone in my chest. But now, a fire was building around it, a white-hot, cleansing fury. I already lit the match, I said. The first picture appeared on my social media feed 2 days after he left. Zane, grinning, holding a fluorescent blue drink, with a caption that read, "Sometimes you just need to reset." Aruba, blessed. He'd tagged the resort. He looked relaxed, unburdened. He looked like a man who hadn't just lost a child. While he was resetting, I was erasing. You sure about this, Ginny? My brother Eddie asked, hefting a box labeled kitchen, non-essentials. At 28, he still had the lanky frame of a teenager, but he was stronger than he looked, and his eyes held a fierce, protective loyalty that was the only real comfort I had left. Positive, I said, taping another box shut. It's the ghost wife policy. My best friend, Solstice, looked up from the spreadsheet on her laptop. She was meticulously photographing and cataloging every valuable item in the apartment before we packed it. Her artist's eye for detail was proving invaluable. The what now? It's a term I read on a legal forum once, I explained, my voice devoid of emotion. When a spouse abandons the marital home, you treat them like a ghost. You remove all trace of your shared life. They come back to an echo. Solstice, who was 33 and had been my rock since we were teenagers, gave a low whistle. Damn, that's cold. I love it. For 3 days, we worked. Eddie handled the heavy lifting and the logistics, hiring a moving company for the big furniture and renting a storage unit under my name only. Solstice was my archivist, creating a digital and physical record of everything we owned, cross-referencing it with bank statements and receipts. It was evidence. Every lamp, every rug, every piece of art was a potential asset in the war to come. I moved with a grim efficiency, fueled by coffee and rage. I packed our wedding photos, the souvenirs from our honeymoon in Italy, the stupid matching mugs he'd bought us. I packed it all away, sealing up 5 years of my life with packing tape. The only thing I left in the nursery was the empty paint can. By the time Zane's 4th beach selfie went up, this one of his feet propped on a railing overlooking the ocean, the apartment was nearly empty. All of my clothes, my books, my life were either in boxes at Eddie's or locked away in storage. All that remained of our home was the master bedroom set, the bed we'd shared, a single nightstand, and a dresser. Even the curtains were gone. I was crashing in Eddie's spare room, a small space that smelled like clean laundry and old books. It was the safest I'd felt in years. Enzo had already filed the emergency motions. He called with updates, his voice crisp and professional. Zane's personal accounts were now frozen, pending a hearing. The court had issued a temporary restraining order preventing him from selling, transferring, or hiding any marital assets. The first shots had been fired while he was ordering another piña colada. On the third night, my phone rang with a number I knew by heart. Fiona. I let it ring 3 times before answering, putting it on speaker so Solstice could hear. Hello? Virginia, dear, she began, her voice dripping with syrupy concern. I've been so worried. You haven't been answering my texts. I've been busy, Fiona. I'm sure you have, she said, the condescension starting to leak through. Zane tells me he can't get a hold of you either, and his credit card was declined this morning. He's very upset. Is he? I asked, my voice a flat line. Virginia, I know you're hurting. We're all hurting, but this behavior is hysterical. You're trying to punish Zane, and it's not fair. He needed this trip. He was suffocating. There it was. The manipulation, clear as day. I was the hysterical, punishing wife. He was the suffocated victim. She had always painted this narrative, but for the first time, I saw the brushstrokes. I wasn't just going to divorce her son. I was going to burn her masterpiece to the ground. I have to go, Fiona, I said. Don't you dare hang up on me. I ended the call. Solstice stared at me, her eyes wide. She's a monster. She's the final boss, I corrected. A few hours later, as I was scrolling through the resort's tagged photos on Instagram, a notification popped up on my phone. A message request from a private account with 0 posts and 0 followers. The message contained only 2 screenshots. They were from a woman's Instagram story, posted that day. The first was a picture of 2 cocktails on a table with the turquoise ocean in the background. The second was a shot of 2 pairs of hands intertwined. One was clearly Zane's. I recognized the new watch. The other hand was a woman's, delicate with pale pink nails. The caption was a simple heart emoji. The story had been tagged with Zane's handle, but it was deleted within minutes. Not before someone had screenshotted it and sent it to me. The anonymous messenger had included one final text. Her name is Paula Mack. Paula Mack. The name was generic, but in the digital age, a name was all you needed. My fingers flew across the keyboard, a cold purpose guiding my search. My work as a legal clerk had made me an expert at digging through public records and social media breadcrumbs. It took me less than an hour to piece together a life. Paula Mack, 36, was a certified public accountant. She worked for a mid-sized firm in the city. Her LinkedIn profile was polished, full of endorsements for financial strategy and tax planning. Her other social media was locked down tight, but her professional bio on her firm's website was a gold mine. It mentioned she specialized in managing finances for high net worth individuals and family estates. A prickle of unease ran down my spine. It felt too specific. On a hunch, I did a new search, combining her name with Fiona's, and there it was. A newsletter from a local charity, dated 1.5 years ago, thanking its major donors. Fiona Moore was listed, and right below her name, in the acknowledgements for the Gala Planning Committee, was Paula Mack, CPA. My blood ran cold. This wasn't some random vacation fling. This was calculated, entrenched. I scrolled back through Zane's credit card statements, which Enzo had already obtained. The charges started a little over 1 year ago, dinners at expensive restaurants I'd never been to, Hotel stays in the city on nights he'd claimed to be working late, a recurring charge for a flower delivery service. He'd been seeing her for a year, a whole year of lies, while we were trying for a baby. The timeline was sickening. He'd held my hand during insemination appointments, then washed it before meeting his mistress. But the connection to Fiona was the part that wouldn't let me go. Fiona was meticulous about her finances, obsessive even. She wouldn't hire just any accountant. She would hire someone she trusted, someone she could control, and she would know everything about them. She knew. The realization hit me with the force of a physical blow. Fiona had known about the affair. She hadn't just paid for Zane's vacation with his mistress, she had likely orchestrated it. It was leverage, a way to keep both her son and her financial pit bull on a leash. She could control Zane with the threat of exposing him to me, and she could control Paula with the threat of ruining her career. It was a perfect, toxic ecosystem of her own design. The grief I thought I had packed away came roaring back, but it was different now. It was laced with a venomous, clarifying rage. They hadn't just dismissed my pain, they had actively plotted against me while I was at my most vulnerable. My miscarriage wasn't a tragedy to them. It was an inconvenience that got in the way of their vacation plans. I stopped being a wife. I stopped being a victim. I became an instrument of consequence. My legal mind took over again, but this time it wasn't just reactive. It was strategic. I wasn't just going after Zane for the money. I was going to dismantle the entire machine. I spent the next day in a deep dive, not into Paula's personal life, but her professional one. I cross-referenced Fiona's known assets, her properties, her investment portfolios, information Enzo had already started compiling, with standard tax filing practices. Fiona liked to brag about her clever financial loopholes. I started looking for the line between clever and illegal. It didn't take long to find the discrepancies. Property tax declarations that undervalued her summer home by a suspicious margin. Charitable donations that seemed inflated. It was all circumstantial, of course. But it was enough to plant a seed of doubt. Using a burner email account and a public library computer, I drafted a very carefully worded tip to the compliance officer at Paula Mac's accounting firm. I didn't mention the affair or my name. I posed as a concerned former client of Fiona's, vaguely mentioning my discomfort with some of the creative accounting strategies I'd observed, and noting that Paula Mac was the accountant of record. I suggested they might want to review the filings for Fiona Moore's estate to ensure they were in line with the firm's standards. I hit send. It was a small, precise push. A single domino aimed at the center of their crooked little world. The best part was, they would never trace it back to me. They would blame each other. Fiona would think Paula had gotten sloppy. Paula would think Fiona had thrown her under the bus. Their alliance, built on secrets, would crumble under the weight of paranoia. The next afternoon, Enzo called me into his downtown office. The space was modern and minimalist, all glass and steel, like him. He didn't waste time with small talk. "Your husband is officially a ghost," he said, gesturing for me to sit. "He's been trying to access his accounts from Aruba. He's calling the bank, he's calling his credit card companies. He's hitting a brick wall everywhere he turns. His mother has been calling me nonstop. I've enjoyed letting her go to voicemail." A small, grim smile touched my lips. "Good. It gets better," Enzo said, his expression turning serious. He slid a thin manila folder across the polished desk toward me. "My paralegal was doing a deep dive on Fiona as part of our asset search. Standard procedure. We pull public records, tax liens, any judgments. You'll want to see this." I opened the folder. Inside was a single document. It was an official notice from the Internal Revenue Service, dated 3 months ago. A notification of a pending audit. Fiona had been on the IRS's radar for months. My anonymous tip hadn't started the fire. It had just thrown gasoline on it. The IRS audit notice wasn't just a threat, it was a key. It explained Fiona's desperation, her need to control every variable, including her son's collapsing marriage. An expensive, contentious divorce would draw exactly the kind of financial scrutiny she was trying to avoid. My decision to fight back wasn't just an emotional inconvenience for her, it was a direct threat to her entire financial existence. Enzo had already leveraged it. Within hours of discovering the notice, he had filed a motion to have a forensic accountant appointed by the court to examine all of Fiona's assets, arguing that she had likely used marital funds from Zane to conceal her own wealth in anticipation of the audit. It was a brilliant, aggressive move. The court, seeing the IRS document, agreed. The island began to boil. The first call from Zane came on a Saturday morning, exactly 1 week after he'd left. I was at Eddie's kitchen table sipping coffee when his name flashed on my screen. I let it go to voicemail. He called back immediately, and again. On the fourth try, I answered, tapping the record button on a small device Enzo had given me. "What do you want, Zane?" I asked, my voice calm. "What the hell did you do?" he roared, his voice tinny and distant. "My cards are all declined. The hotel is threatening to kick me out. And my mother just called me, screaming, saying her accounts are being frozen. What did you do, Ginny?" I took a slow sip of coffee. "I'm not sure what you're talking about. I'm just resting, like you told me to, trying not to be dramatic." "Don't play dumb with me," he shouted. "This has your name written all over it. You're trying to ruin my mother because you're mad at me. She has nothing to do with this." The lie was so bold-faced, so utterly shameless, that I almost laughed. "Your mother who booked your ticket to Aruba with your mistress? That mother?" There was a stunned silence on the other end of the line. What are you talking about? Paula is just a friend." "Paula Mack," I said, letting her name hang in the air. "Fiona's accountant. You're a fair partner for the last year. Don't insult my intelligence, Zane. I know everything." He stammered, sputtering denials that sounded weak even to him. He accused me of being crazy, of making things up, of being vindictive. I let him talk, his panic and fury a symphony to my ears. Every word was another nail in his coffin, another piece of evidence for Enzo. "You've ruined everything," he finally choked out, his anger giving way to a pathetic whimper. "You've ruined my mother." "You should have thought of that before you drained our savings account and left your grieving wife," I said, and hung up. The satisfaction was cold and clean, but it didn't last. As the day wore on, a sliver of guilt began to press in, not for Zane and not for Fiona, but for myself. I was becoming someone I didn't recognize, someone who thrived on this cold-blooded strategy. The part of me that had cried in the hospital bathroom felt like a distant memory, a ghost of a softer woman. Was this power, or was this just a different kind of brokenness? That evening, an email landed in my new, secure inbox. The subject line was just one word: Fiona. The sender's name was Rachel Boyd. I recognized the name immediately. Rachel was Fiona's niece, the daughter of her estranged sister. She was 29, worked as a paralegal, and from what I remembered, Fiona treated her like a charity case, occasionally inviting her to holidays to show how magnanimous she was. The body of the email was short: Virginia. I know what my aunt is capable of. I heard what happened, and I'm so sorry. There are things you don't know, things she's done before. If you're serious about this, I can help. I want to talk. My heart hammered against my ribs. An ally, an insider. It was a risk. Rachel could be a plant, a trap set by Fiona, but my intuition, the same one that had told me something was wrong weeks before I found the bank statements, screamed that this was real. I wrote back. When and where? We met the next day at a noisy coffee shop halfway between her apartment and Eddie's. Rachel was nervous, her hands wrapped tightly around a mug of tea. She had the same sharp features as Fiona, but her eyes were kind. "Thank you for meeting me," she said, her voice barely a whisper. "I shouldn't be doing this. If she finds out—" "She won't," I assured her. "What do you know, Rachel?" She took a deep breath. "My aunt's control. It's not just about money, it's generational. It's about legacy, about the Moore name. She's terrified of anyone tarnishing it." She looked down at her hands. "This isn't the first time she's interfered with one of Zane's relationships to this extreme." "What do you mean?" "Zane had a serious girlfriend in college, a woman named Claire. They were talking about getting married. She got pregnant." Rachel's eyes met mine, and what I saw in them made my stomach clench. "Fiona found out. She told Zane it would ruin his future. She gave him an ultimatum, the family or this girl. He chose the family. Fiona, she paid for the abortion. She drove Claire to the clinic herself and made sure it was done." The coffee in my stomach turned to acid. "That's not all," Rachel said, her voice dropping even lower. "A few years before that, my aunt was desperate for a grandchild to carry on the name. She was convinced Zane would never settle down, so she went behind everyone's back. She secretly hired a surrogate, using a donor. She was going to raise the child herself. But the pregnancy, it wasn't viable. It ended late term." Rachel looked at me, her expression a mixture of pity and horror. "She doesn't just get rid of problems, Virginia. She tries to control life and death itself." Zane came home a day early. He couldn't afford another night at the resort. He flew back economy, a humiliating downgrade paid for by a loan from a friend, and walked into an echo chamber. He called me, his voice hollow with shock. "It's all gone, Ginny. Everything is gone." "I know," I said. "I packed it." He didn't yell this time. He just breathed into the phone, a ragged, defeated sound. "Why?" "You needed space," I replied, my voice flat. "I gave you space, acres of it." The fallout was swift and brutal. My anonymous tip, combined with the court-ordered forensic accounting, had triggered a full-blown investigation at Paula's firm. She was suspended, then fired, her professional reputation shredded. Fiona's assets were now completely entangled in legal proceedings, a spiderweb of freezes and liens. The IRS audit had been officially escalated. Subpoenas were issued. But I knew a legal and financial victory wasn't enough. Fiona's power wasn't just in her bank accounts. It was in her reputation, her carefully constructed image as a philanthropic matriarch. That's the foundation I needed to shatter. I wrote everything down: the miscarriage, the trip to Aruba, the secret bank account, the affair with Fiona's accountant. I created a new anonymous Reddit account and posted it to a popular relationship forum. I titled it, "My husband left for a vacation with his mistress 24 hours after I miscarried our baby. His mother paid for it." I didn't use our real names, but the details were specific enough. I included redacted screenshots of the bank transfers, the Instagram story from Paula, and the flight confirmation Zane had carelessly left on our shared computer. I wrote it in the raw, heartbroken voice of the woman I had been 2 weeks ago. Then I walked away from the computer. By the next morning, it had gone viral. It was shared thousands of times, picked up by content aggregators and online magazines. The comments were a tidal wave of outrage and support. People called my anonymous husband a monster. They called his mother a demon. Internet sleuths, with a terrifying efficiency, started piecing things together. They found the resort Zane had tagged. They cross-referenced it with Paula's now-deleted social media. Within a day, their full names were being whispered in the comment threads. Zane's company, a tech firm obsessed with its public image, was tagged repeatedly. He was suspended from his job by the end of the week, pending an internal investigation. His carefully curated professional life was crumbling into ash, just like his personal one. I felt a grim, satisfying sense of justice. But a part of me, The part that still mourned the woman I used to be felt a sick churn in my stomach. I had never known I was capable of such methodical cruelty. The revenge was clean and precise, but it was still an act of destruction. I was burning down their lives, and I couldn't pretend there wasn't a dark thrill in watching the flames. One evening, there was a sharp, insistent knock on Eddie's apartment door. My brother was at work, so I was alone. I looked through the peephole and my blood froze. It was Fiona. Her face was a mask of cold fury. Her perfectly coiffed hair was slightly askew, and her eyes burned with a hatred that was almost feral. I didn't open the door. "I know you're in there, Virginia," she called, her voice muffled but sharp. "You think you're so clever, don't you, hiding behind your lawyers and your anonymous internet posts?" I remained silent, my back pressed against the door. "You are making a terrible mistake," she hissed. "You have no idea who you're dealing with. You need to stop this. Withdraw the legal filings. Tell that pit bull of an attorney to stand down. You can have the divorce. You can even have some money. But you will stop this attack on my family." I still said nothing. "I know what Rachel told you," she said, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "About the surrogate. If you go public with that story, if you try to use that against me, you will regret it more than you have ever regretted anything in your life." A minute passed in silence. I heard the rustle of paper, then the sound of something being slid under the door. "Think about it," she said, her voice retreating down the hall. "Think about what happens when everyone sees the kind of person you really are." My hand trembled as I bent down to pick up the plain manila envelope. Inside was a single glossy photograph. It was a clinical, heartbreaking image, a tiny, perfectly formed but lifeless baby, taken in what looked like a hospital setting. On the back, written in Fiona's elegant script, were the words, "The surrogate's mistake. Sometimes things just aren't meant to be." It was a threat, a trigger, a piece of psychological warfare designed to shatter my composure, to use my own grief as a weapon against me. She was telling me she knew my deepest pain and wasn't afraid to exploit it. She thought it would break me. But as I stared at that devastating photo, something else happened. The last vestiges of my grief, the last whispers of guilt were burned away by a pure white-hot rage. She hadn't just invalidated my loss, she was mocking it. She was holding up the ghost of her own lost legacy to taunt the ghost of mine. She thought this would make me back down. She had just guaranteed I would bury her. Fiona's photograph wasn't a weapon, it was a confession. It was physical proof of the story Rachel had told me, a story so monstrous it would have been unbelievable without it. She had handed me the final piece of ammunition I needed. The reckoning was not a single explosion, but a series of controlled demolitions. First, Enzo anonymously leaked select court filings to a legal journalist known for her scathing exposés on the wealthy elite. The documents detailed the emergency asset freeze, the allegations of financial abuse, and the court-ordered forensic accountant. The story, titled "High Society, Low Blows, Tech Manager's Bitter Divorce, Unearths Family's Financial Secrets," was clinical, factual, and utterly damning. It didn't mention the miscarriage, only the cold, hard numbers. Next, I gave the recorded phone call with Zane to the same journalist. His panicked, rage-filled tirade from Aruba, where he admitted his mother had paid for the trip and inadvertently confirmed his presence with Paula, was transcribed and published as a follow-up. His company, which had been hoping the scandal would blow over, fired him the same day, citing a morals clause in his contract. Then came Paula. With her career in ruins and Fiona no longer protecting her, she turned. Her lawyer filed a wrongful termination lawsuit against her former firm, but more importantly, she sued Fiona directly for tortious interference, claiming Fiona had used her position as a client to manipulate and ultimately sabotage her career. Her lawsuit included sworn affidavits detailing the affair and Fiona's complicity. The narrative of Zane the cheater was now cemented in a legal document. The final, most devastating blow was aimed directly at Fiona's heart. Through Enzo, I provided Rachel's testimony, along with a high-resolution scan of the photograph Fiona had given me, to the journalist. The story that followed was a masterpiece of character assassination. It painted Fiona not as a grieving mother or a society philanthropist, but as a manipulative mastermind who controlled her son's life to the point of forcing a past girlfriend to have an abortion and secretly attempting to procure an heir through a surrogate. The stillborn photo, presented as a tool of psychological intimidation against me, was the horrifying centerpiece. The public image she had spent a lifetime cultivating was incinerated overnight. The charities she supported began quietly removing her name from their donor walls. Old friends stopped returning her calls. The IRS, now armed with public allegations of complex financial schemes, intensified their investigation. Her world, once a fortress, was collapsing in on itself. I watched it all from a distance. I had already moved out of Eddie's place and into a small, sunlit apartment in a different part of the city. The divorce was being fast-tracked. Zane, stripped of his job, his money, and his reputation, had no resources to fight it. Enzo had negotiated a settlement where I got the entirety of the remaining marital assets and our original apartment, which I immediately put on the market. In exchange, I would not pursue him for the $32,000 he had stolen. It was a small price to pay to be free of him forever. One evening, there was a knock on my new door. It was Zane. He looked like a stranger, thinner, haggard, with dark circles under his eyes. The arrogance was gone, replaced by a hollowed-out despair. "How did you find me?" I asked, not opening the door all the way. "I begged Eddie," he said, his voice raspy. He told me I had 5 minutes. I let him stand in the doorway. He looked around my small, sparsely furnished living room. It was a life he had no part in, and he knew it. "I have nothing," he whispered, his eyes welling with tears. "My job, my friends. My accounts are all locked up in Mum's legal mess. I'm broke, Ginny. I have nothing left." I felt a flicker of something, not pity, but a distant clinical sadness for the man I had once loved, the man who had been so thoroughly broken by his own weakness and his mother's poison. "You were right," he muttered, a tear finally tracing a path through the stubble on his cheek. "About everything. I was a coward. I let her run my life. I let her ruin us. I'm so sorry." The apology was years too late. It meant nothing now. I turned, walked to my small desk, and picked up an envelope. I handed it to him. He opened it. Inside was a one-way plane ticket. "What's this?" he asked, confused. "It's a flight to Phoenix," I said. "Fiona's sister, Rachel's mother, lives there. It's the only family you have left that might be willing to take you in. The ticket is for tomorrow morning. I suggest you go pack what little you have left, pick up your mother, and get out of the state before the IRS decides to indict her." He stared at me, his mouth agape. He had come here expecting... what? A fight? Forgiveness? A final dramatic scene? I was offering him none of it. I was just offering him an exit, an escape from the ruins we had made. "Go, Zane," I said, my voice soft but final. "It's over." I closed the door on his stunned face, locking it behind him. The click of the deadbolt was the last sound our marriage ever made. The silence in the apartment after the door clicked shut was absolute. It was a heavy, dense quiet that the hum of the refrigerator couldn't penetrate. I had expected to feel a surge of triumph, a cathartic release. Instead, I felt a profound emptiness. The fire that had been fueling me for weeks, the rage, the need for vengeance, had consumed its fuel. Zane and Fiona were gone, and the fire had simply burned out. leaving behind a landscape of cold ash. I walked over to the window and looked down at the street, but he was already gone. The war was over. I had won. But the victory felt hollow, a ghost of an emotion. The revenge was satisfying, yes. It was clean and cold and complete, but the grief was still there, waiting patiently beneath it all. It had been there the whole time. An hour later, my phone buzzed. It was Eddie. He gone? You okay? He's gone. I'm okay. I typed back, though I wasn't sure if it was true. He replied instantly. Good. Don't forget my offer stands. My spare room is your room as long as you want it. No questions asked. A genuine warmth spread through my chest, a feeling so unfamiliar it almost made me cry. Thank you, Eddie. I know. The next evening, Solstice showed up at my door with a giant canvas wrapped in brown paper and 2 bottles of expensive wine. She didn't say a word, just walked in, kicked off her shoes, and started unwrapping her offering. Every new beginning needs art, she declared, revealing a stunning, abstract painting, a swirl of deep blues and fierce, defiant streaks of gold. It was beautiful and chaotic and strong. It looked like how I felt. Where do you want it? She asked, holding it up against the largest blank wall. There, I said, my voice thick. That's perfect. We spent the next hour hanging it, our movements easy and familiar. We opened the wine and sat on the floor, leaning against the sofa, just looking at it. Did you hear anything? I asked quietly. Solstice took a sip of her wine. A friend of a friend works at the airport. Saw them at the gate for a flight to Phoenix this morning. Said they looked like ghosts. Fiona was wearing sunglasses indoors, and Zane just stared straight ahead, not talking to her. I nodded, absorbing the finality of it. They were an anecdote now, a story someone told a friend. The sale on your old apartment closes next week, Solstice said, changing the subject. Clean break. And Enzo called me, by the way. He wanted to make sure you were doing all right. He's a good lawyer, I said. He's a shark, she corrected with a smile. And you aimed him perfectly. Later that night, after Solstice had left, I was getting ready for bed when my phone lit up with a text. It was from Enzo. Heard the targets have been neutralized. Well done, Steele. You could teach my other clients a thing or two. Ever consider revenge planning as a career? I almost smiled. I typed back a simple, don't tempt me, and put the phone down. I stood in the middle of my new living room, the moonlight slanting through the window, illuminating the golden streaks in Solstice's painting. The legal battles would continue for months, a slow grind of paperwork and depositions happening in a world I was no longer a part of. The viral stories would fade. The outrage would move on to the next monster, the next tragedy. All that was left was me, here, in the quiet. The revenge didn't cure the grief. It didn't fill the space that had been carved out of me in that cold hospital bathroom, but it had given me something else. It had taken the narrative of the hysterical, dramatic, broken woman that Zane and Fiona had tried to write for me, and it had allowed me to burn the pages myself. I wasn't healed. I wasn't whole. But I was no longer a victim. I was the architect of their ruin, the orchestrator of my own survival. Karma wasn't some mystical force. It was a strategy. I didn't get my baby back, but I took everything else.